Hello everyone, Evan Rodke, your instructor again. I've got a little video for you here to help explain out analytic paper number 1 a little bit. So the first thing I want to mention is it's very important that you go over the feedback that I left on the short writing assignment. Because the idea is I spend some time going over trying to help you going over the content and the writing style and the use of support and citations and all of those things. And the idea is that you review the comments I have made, and then you learn from those and bring that into the future writing assignments, which first of all is the first one of which is analytic paper number 1. Okay, so that's going to be very important. If you do not see your grade and that your short writing assignment has been evaluated yet, it is coming soon. I've been working through them, and if yours isn't up, it's just yet to be graded and will be soon. But the point is that you want to make sure you go over that. Okay, so now for analytic paper number 1 itself. So this one, as you know from reading over the assignment sheet posted on Blackboard, is on ethnography, the ethnographic methods, and fieldwork and participant observation. So the idea is behind this paper is it's so important as students of anthropology or any discipline in the sciences or social sciences in particular to understand how the information that you are reading about or that you're listening to in class, if you're in an on-campus class, how that information was obtained. Where does it come from? So that's why we focus on the methods pretty early on in the course, and that's why I have a paper that focuses on it as well. Okay, so this is an essay structured that way. So section 2, called organization of the required for all writing document, lays out how an essay goes, with an introduction, transitioning through major points, and a conclusion. So first of all, in your introduction, which you do not necessarily need to write first, but obviously does need to start off the paper, following in the introduction, you set up the paper. As the name introduction suggests, you introduce the material that the paper is going to be about. You don't launch into the material yet. Then comes your first point. So for this paper, the tasks that are required, the first one, and I have a printout of it here to make sure I don't miss anything. The first task of this paper, after your introduction, what you need to go through is explaining ethnographic fieldwork and participant observation, which are outlined for you there in chapter 3. But in doing that, you need to make sure you incorporate these key terms and concepts, and that is cultural relativism, and then quantitative as opposed to qualitative data, emic and etic perspective, the concept of reflexivity, which is explained in its own little section. And then you also need to discuss some of the ways that ethnographic fieldwork and participant observation have changed over the years. And if you do that, all of those things, you should have a pretty solid understanding of how this method works. Now, the next task you do is kind of like applying it. So the 2 content specific chapters that we've covered so far are on race and language. So what you're going to do is go through those 2 chapters, and you're going to pick out 5 in whatever combination you want, whatever you're interested in, 5 examples of ethnographic methods and participant observation being used to generate anthropological knowledge. So in other words, the author draws on studies that have been done and published in order to make his point about whatever it is, about language or race or any specific aspects of those things. And so what you need to do as a reader of that material is take note of a particular study he's talking about or some kind of concept that's based on research that's been done this way, and you need to then pull that out and discuss that as an example of what you just explained up in the first point, which was the method itself. So you can see kind of a progression there. You have the method that you explain, and then you move on to specific applications of that method being used. And by that time, it should be clear to you how this method works and then how it can be used to generate particular points of anthropological knowledge, because you've gone through and picked out examples of them and explained them. You then have to provide a conclusion to the paper. And in the conclusion, what you want to do is explain why anthropological methods, the methods discussed, fieldwork and participant observation, are useful. What was the strength of them? What's the point, in other words, of using those methods and explaining what they can do for the researcher and for you, the consumer of the research? How do they help in your understanding? But there's also issues with this method, because there's issues with any method. One method of research may generate knowledge that another doesn't, but it may also leave out some that another does cover. And ethnography, this approach is no exception. So you also need to cover some of the issues associated with this method. And that material, you need to draw from material under the sections, what moral and ethical concerns guide anthropologists in their research and writing. That's one section in chapter 3. And the other is, how are fieldwork strategies changing in response to globalization? So under those two sections, you should find some good information on the kind of issues associated with this, and you need to cover those as well. Then, of course, you need works cited. All along in the paper, you need to be using material from the book to support your explanations. And of course, for that second task, you absolutely have to, right? You couldn't do it otherwise, because you're pulling out examples of using these methods to understand the material on language and race. Okay? So that should do it. Again, make sure you are going over the feedback from the short writing assignment very carefully and rolling anything into this assignment that you needed to address there. Essentially, you don't want to make the same mistakes twice, and you want to be learning from that material. If in the process of putting this paper together you have any questions or anything is tripping you up, be sure to contact me, and I'm happy to help. Thank you, everyone, and good luck.